Hey, what's going on, guys? We got another video for you guys today. Um, Part two with Carl has been delayed a little bit, and we're going off a side tangent with him. And with this study too, we are having on my Hebrew teacher today, Shamir Barnett, and she's now my Greek teacher as well, which is new and great. She holds two master's degrees, one from
Bar Ilan,
Bar Ilan, and one from Regent University. Is that
right?
right?
Right.
All right.
Yes, that's right.
She's been my Hebrew teacher for a little over a year now. Just started Greek last month, so happy to have her on. And she has a little introduction of herself and what she's going to be presenting today. So, hand it over to
Right.
you.
All right. So I just want to give a little introduction of how I grew up. I actually grew up in Islam in my early childhood, and so it was a very closed off existence. So I didn't really have any exposure to the Bible, or I never heard of Jesus even, um, and really not even until I left home. And when I was about between 5 and 7, I had a encounter with God, and I only heard there's only one God. That's what I heard. I was standing in the doorway of my room, and then people often ask me, was it a voice? Was it, but you're a child, so children don't generally ask questions like adults do because you don't really have a basis to think like, who is this? Is that you, God? Anyway, so now today I realized that there is only one God. Is really the Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, or the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And then after that, my mind kind of opened up. I was still just a child, and then um, I understood that evolution and even other religions were not true, that the God that was speaking to me was the only one. And then I decided that I was probably maybe about 8 or something like this, and I decided that I would learn the Bible, that I learned it really well, and then teach it to others. So, except God didn't tell me how complicated that would be. So, all right. Do you have anything you want to ask or add before I?
I think that's a very good introduction, and the Shema is very um powerful for me too. It's definitely one of my favorite passages in Deuteronomy 6:4. Um, yeah, that's a great background. So you can move on to the next section if you want.
All right. And so then I just want to say why I started studying or basically torturing myself in some ways, because I mean, the average person does see Hebrew. I mean, it is a lot of work to study languages. And it's not just Hebrew, actually, that's in the Bible. You have some Egyptian, like Yam Suf, or the Reed Sea. Suf is really an Egyptian word, not a Hebrew word. Moshe's name is, I mean, it's highly unlikely that Pharaoh's daughters were um referring to him in Hebrew. So you have a lot of mixture there.
That's in
So
the current Torah portion, right?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
So when
because
you're
we're
when you're reading through the Torah portion this week, if you are, there might be some Egyptian in there even.
right.
Take note of it.
So my why I started studying biblical languages. I mean, I always had a desire, but you don't really know where to begin because nothing is really given to you when you come into Christianity. You're just given the Bible, and then that's it. Like no real history or language. So I had frustrations with the limitations of English. Not really being able to check the Word of God for myself. Hearing so-called preachers refer to the meaning of Hebrew words and not being able to check for myself to know whether what they were saying was true or not. Like sometimes you hear something and like sometimes I would just go home and I'm like, God, I know that what this guy just said is not true, but I have no way to check it for myself. So it's rather ignorant. And the more I studied, the more ignorant I realized I was. Um, uh, Hearing things that were questionable, like I said, not being able to confirm or deny whether it's true. and that, like I said, other issues were receiving this Bible without not really connected to anything, sort of like a floating text somebody just hands to you without any explanation, history, or cultural understanding of what you're reading. When I was about 21, I realized that there was this kind of disconnect, and like I felt like we went in counterclockwise direction to what the Bible said for the most part, as far as like what we did or celebrations, or it just seemed something was off. So I thought, I could have a meaningful discussion with somebody. So I asked them if they ever feel like this disconnect, and of course they came back with a resounding no. And so it was a way that the person said no that I realized that asking questions was probably not going to be a good idea of anybody. And then whatever issues I had or concerns, I need to just keep it between me and God because I didn't really have any um, anywhere to turn as far as uh, to somebody else, or um, it's just like anyway. So that was that. Um, let's see, where do I want to go from here with all my mini notes?
Um, do you think learning the biblical languages, we'll say, Hebrew for now, is like you said it's a difficult ta task, but is it as difficult as people make it out to be? To the point where you're avoiding it entirely.
Well, I think the issue is like, well, one problem is that we've put translations in the front seat, and the actual text where the translation comes from, we put it in the back seat. So the translations have been elevated over the source from which they came. I actually kind of see like, well, I have to go into this spiel because I can't separate the two ideas. So this is kind of going back a little bit. Because when Yeshua's disciples in Acts 1:6, before he ascended, they asked him, when would the kingdom of Israel be restored? Of course, we know he said he couldn't give them the time or the season or when this restoration would take place. But now I see that we've been in that restoration period now for some time, because you see a lot of Christians, a lot of believers now coming to the Torah and understanding, or sort of unmasking what has been masked by centuries of Christianity and replacement theology. So I see Hebrew as part of kind of like, I call it the heritage return package. So like when you make Aliyah to Israel, one of the caveats is that you receive like free Hebrew uh, ulpan, so you can learn to speak and to kind of become part of the community that you've moved to. And so I just see that as part of this now, restoration, um, the restoration of Israel and the return. So is Hebrew hard? I mean, it has its challenges, obviously, for obvious reasons. Is that, I mean, you read it backwards and you have to learn a whole new alphabet. You've got gutturals, not something that's part of English, the English language. Um, I have to refer to my notes now. Because something else I want to say is that in-depth study of the language can bring an authenticity that is removed or washed away with translations. There's a lot of people that, when they look at uh, an English translation, and whether they have minimal Hebrew study or no Hebrew study at all, a lot of believers come back with the same response that, well, it doesn't really look much different than the English. And it's because that the basic and simple meaning is what a translation is. So everything is washed away, all the word plays, uh, and then you just have a really simple text of the Hebrew Bible. Like difficult passages, um, like in literal translations, which is a better translation than, like, say, the Living Bible or what's the other one? The Message, because those are really paraphrases, and there's a whole thing with that. But anyway, um, I lost my train of thought because I just uh,
Oh, that's fine. I was gonna ask you at some point to, you know, list some translations for people to avoid other than
well, it would definitely be the Living Bible and the Message Bible. I mean, that's
right.
like um, I have a little note about the Living Translation. Let's see where yeah, so the Living Translation was translated by a businessman, K. Taylor, um, and it's a paraphrase. It's a restatement of the author's thought using different words than the author did, and because of he has a rigid theological bias, so he replaces words in the text according so that it would match his own theology. So this is one issue with translations. So replacing the word Christ in John 1:1, or replacing the word with Christ in John 1:1, or substituting the word for Messiah and putting in the Son of Man instead. So that's, I mean, it's kind of like not any different than putting the word church into the text where it doesn't, there's no such word and no such entity existed at the Second Temple period. So,
Right.
uh,
Right.
but that's just more of a replacement theological idea anyway. So
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that. So the word that's translated like into church
it's
in the
ecclesia.
original it means more like
Well, it's the same as what you read in the Tanakh, kahal,
yeah,
or there's another, or eda. So, so those are like congregations or congregation of people, or so that's the word. So that's really kind of manipulative uh,
right, right.
of the text. But anyway, the other chief obstacle that I see with the lack of learning. I mean, you can still keep your translations and enjoy them, but it would be better to learn some of the language so you can connect text together. Because, like, when you're just reading English, you don't have to do really anything because everything is done for you. Um, it's when you kind of get into the complexity of seeing, like, or one issue is that connecting words together, connecting words from the Tanakh to the apostolic writings or covenant renewal, or even knowing why am I even calling it the covenant renewal and not, the New Testament? Because New Testament, Old Testament didn't come in until the second century, sorry. Um, so like one of my aha moments was I was sitting in my room and I was reading the modern uh, Hebrew New Testament, which is only loosely based on the Greek, so you can't really read it without the Greek text, or I wouldn't recommend not having some handle on Greek because of word changes. But and then I saw the word mayim chayim, so living water. And in English, if you read that in English, in the Tanakh, you'll see like flowing water or um, something like this. But the phrase living water isn't used there. But when I read that in the apostolic writings and then in the Tanakh, like say in the text referring to washing the offerings before they're presented, the same phrase is used, living waters. And then I do have to say that when Yeshua speaks, and this is one of the reasons why his disciples were confused. This probably doesn't have to do with learning Hebrew, maybe, but it's because like when he speaks, what he says has is multi-level, so it can have a couple of different meanings. So living water can be obviously ingesting living water and never thirsting again, but also you see the living waters that were used to wash the sacrifices, and so then you're ingesting this cleansing water as well. So then you have like this double meaning, and it happens all throughout the text. It's not just this one thing. Um, so I would say language as a way to connect texts together, and I know that there's many people that don't really see so much value again in studying because why go through all the trouble? I mean, you have the English translation and, you know,
Right.
But if you want more, if you don't ever have any questions or and you're just completely satisfied, then you could just keep your translation and never study anything. Studying makes you more word conscious, is what I found, because you have to really slow down and understand what you're reading. So again, obviously English or whatever translation you're reading is limited, so you can't go beyond that. Um, and even if you have some training or you want to read scholarly commentaries, you still would need to have some language acquisition
Right.
to be able
Because
to write.
they'll like put a Hebrew word in there, whether that be transliterated or the Hebrew characters and different commentaries. And you know
Right.
I've
Yeah,
read some books that insert a Greek word, and I've struggled with that because my Greek isn't there yet. So I kind of struggle to
well,
see that the authors
you've
really.
only been studying for like a couple of
I
weeks,
know.
so
Right. So it's like, even if you want to read some of these more scholarly works, you kind of need to understand what they're talking about.
right.
Right.
Yeah, but it does take time to see the value in the language. Like I said, if have minimal Hebrew study or language study or none, you see things on the internet or somebody says something to you, that is not enough to make any kind of assessment as to the value of learning Hebrew. And I'm sorry to say that you've got to study at least 3, 4, 5 years uh, to really see the impact and again the knitting together of the text. One of my many pet peeves is weak word usage or understanding, like the word promise is like God promised. No, God swore in a legal binding oath, and we know that by the word shavah. Um, this is what he swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to give them the land. Tabernacle. I've had Hebrew students who get confused because they see Mishkan and then, but in the English it says tabernacle, and they just uh, have a difficult time because they see Mishkan and then they know Shachan, to live or dwell, is the verbal form of Mishkan, the dwelling place of God. And then tabernacle is there. And I'm not the only one that has an issue. I have some friends that um, I said the word tabernacle one time. She's like, I hate that word. And she's Israeli. So, and grace, instead of understanding chesed, um, because that flows through both texts, the Tanakh, and into the apostolic writings or the covenant renewal. Um, and then I told you about some, let's see where, Nazaret or Nazarah, right? So that's a whole, because we say that, or many people say that Yeshua was a Nazir, so meaning that he abstained from wine, which he didn't, obviously, because he drank wine. And it's just because there's a Z character in Greek, uh, but there's not one in Hebrew. So in Hebrew is not tseret with a sade. And then we read the verse. Let's see. I write that down. Let's hope so. Maybe I didn't write it on this one. I have like these two sets of notes, so let's see if I put it verse on the other one. I didn't do that. All right. Actually, I think I'll go back to that one, but I like the grace and truth in John 1:14, the chesed ve'emet, and then this is where the modern Hebrew New Testament actually gets it right by using this term, because this term, like the first chapter of John, really is like a synopsis of the Torah and God's sworn oath to Israel. So, and we read it as grace and truth, which doesn't tell you really. I mean, it sounds nice, and of course, like you're reading English, and it doesn't mean that you're not getting anything out of it, but you're sort of like missing the Israel connection uh, every time. And
Real
I
quick,
think that's, yeah.
with the modern Hebrew translations from Greek into Hebrew.
The Greek
Um,
is like it's loosely translated from Greek into Hebrew.
gotcha. Is there any that you've found in particular that's better than the others, or do you look at multiple
What do you mean?
of the modern Hebrew translations?
No, they're all like I have a couple of older ones, but they're kind of all challenging. I find I have to go back to the Greek to look, and one of the problems is that like I expect to see a certain word because when I read the modern Hebrew text, I know already what it says in the Tanakh, so for the most part, and so when I don't see the words that would connect that phrase to the Tanakh, and that is irritating to me. And because I use a modern Hebrew word instead, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but um, and so then I have to go to the Greek text to see what it really says, and then I have to go to a couple of Greek lexicons to see what Hebrew word should be there, and then you know,
When the New Testament's trying to talk about a Tanakh concept, and you're saying it can use the wrong word at sometimes.
well, because it uses modern Hebrew
Yeah, in the
words,
modern
so this is
Hebrew.
the problem. So it takes away or it causes the text to not be connected together, like word usage, or even misunderstanding covenant language. Although I'm going to go back to John 1:14 first. So you have the phrase chesed ve'emet. If you go all throughout the Tanakh, the Torah, you'll see this phrase. We just read it a few weeks ago in one of the Torah portions where Jacob asked Joseph to deal kindly with him, meaning with chesed ve'emet. So this chesed is like going beyond the call of duty. Grace is kind of a weak translation of it. But anyway, so in a footnote, if you read for John 1:14, it says this chesed ve'emet probably reproduced the famous Old Testament pairing of chesed and emet, God's kindness or mercy in choosing Israel independently of any merit on Israel's part, and God's enduring fidelity to the covenant with Israel that expresses this kindness. So this is what I mean, like um, you sort of you don't get the full picture of the Israel connection when are you checking, are you looking it up?
Yeah, I was just looking at John 1:14.
Yeah. And then there's and it where it says that and he dwelt among us, so that's another Old Testament or Tanakh phrase where it talks about Shachan, so God's dwelling um, in the midst of his people, betochenu. So that's what it says, in our midst. So that's a very, very Torah phrase that we read in Exodus, God saying that, I will dwell among you and I will be your God and so on. So all those phrases are pointing us right back into the Tanakh. So this is what I mean by word connection. And because the English uses grace and truth, and then if you read it in the Tanakh, it probably says like loving kindness. So it's kind of challenging to connect those two ideas together. Like I would never have known that this is the same phrase, chesed ve'emet, in John 1:14 that we find in the Tanakh. I would not, I personally, maybe somebody else would have been able to connect those without the language, but I don't see how that's possible. The other thing is, well, again, that sort of gives weak ideas. Oh yeah, this was one. I remember I was like 22 or something at the time, 23, and this woman had said to me, she was kind of torn up about it too, like because it says that God loved Jacob but hates Esau. And I knew that what she was saying, like, wasn't couldn't be what it said. But since because of my own ignorance, I couldn't give her an explanation as to what that meant. But now I can. That love and hate are actually covenantal terms. So in this case, first we have to understand Esau. When he rejected his birthright, I don't know if this really has so much to do with studying Hebrew, but anyway, maybe you guys will know what you're missing by me saying all these things. Um, when he rejected his birthright, he actually rejected the covenant and anything to do with it, to be part of Israel, to inherit the land. And so when it says hate, it actually means reject. And where it says God loved Jacob, it means that he accepted Jacob because Jacob accepted the covenant. And we sort of get lost. There's a term that we use. It's free will. Free will. Well, we all have free will. That's kind of like a Greek, like a Greek term or idea that has many arguments to it. It's been argued about for centuries. But I think that that sort of gives us more of a weaker understanding of God's word and what he actually requires. So, like, if you don't accept your position as Israel, because everyone is, I do want to say that everybody, like, when you come to the God of Israel and you are atoned for by the blood of Yeshua, you come into covenant. It's like at Sinai or Sinai all over again. So you stand at the mount, you receive this atonement from Yeshua, a heavenly high priest, and then you say yes, amen, to the covenant, to the Torah. Um, and so that makes us all uh, Israel anyway. And so Esau rejected that, Jacob accepted that. And then when Yeshua says, "If you love me," this is also the covenantal legal speech. You will do my commandments. Whenever that word is used for um, a king, Yahweh, or Yeshua, um, and actually the expectation is that you will immediately, in loving obedience, do what you're told to do. And obviously, God has a lot of mercy and grace on us, but the expectation is immediate obedience. Uh, so. Um, anyway, so when you read that, ahav is saneh. So ahav is to love, saneh is to hate, but in this covenantal legal terms, it means to accept or reject. I have another. Oh yeah, this just has a lot of in Malachi chapter 1. Uh, the word love is used there too as a covenantal word, or is this an election word. So God chose Israel because he loved her. And you can go through all the scriptures for that. Um, again, he also makes a note of when Yahweh says, I have loved Jacob, he means I chose Jacob and so on. So covenantal language. Legal, it's legal. This is another thing people don't understand with the covenant or with the God of Israel, that this is legally binding. Like God can never Israel can be punished, but the land can never be taken away. It's like we saw with the renewal covenant with Moshe at the end of Deuteronomy or Devarim. He passes the baton to Yehoshua, and the covenant is renewed. And this is actually how these the disciples and those who were with Yeshua, this is how they saw this covenant renewal. That's why I call it covenant renewal. Um, because it uses the same language too, like when he says Dam Habrit, so the blood of the covenant. I feel like I'm probably going off track, but I don't know if this what I'm saying is relevant to our topic of Bible translations again. But
Right.
um,
It's fine.
um, because we use the word renewed, so I'll just read this little. It says renewed. So in this understanding of the covenant renewal under Yeshua, um, the renewal part is that it's not like the covenant that made with the ancestors, and it may have, and that's the, although it is still the covenant for Israel, even though there's some changes. Yeshua becomes the high priest. The Mishkan goes to the heavens, God's domain, and it's no longer an earthly Mishkan. And that's just, if I backtrack just a little bit, with John 1:4, I mean 1:14, or I think it might be 1:16, where it says, "And they dwelt among us," or the word became, or It's John chapter 1 again, yeah. And I was just saying that when it says that he dwelt among us, the word became flesh and dwelt among us, so it makes me think of the Mishkan that was made out of animal skins. And here Yeshua is full of the Spirit, like because God's presence would come into the Mishkan and fill it. And so now Yeshua is here, filled with the Spirit, moving about the land of Israel and bringing healing and strength to those in salvation. Um, that's another thing too, like people with the word salvation, and they said, you can be saved. And then if you ask, what are you saved from? It's you're saved from the death penalty. Uh, so there's a lot of like the other thing too is uh, with Hebrew, it's the language is harsher, so it doesn't always coincide with Western sensibilities, or it doesn't always sound nice. Like, well, I say misunderstanding covenant language, like the disobedience and apostasy of the golden calf incident endangered the whole community. Right? God's presence withdrew and then allowed these personifications of evil to enter the camp and destroy the community. So if the Levites had allowed their own relatives, so here the Levites, when Moshe says, "Who's with me?" they stand up and they say that they are with him, and then they kill those who bowed down to the golden calf, um, which included their own relatives, mother, father, son's daughter, um, so on. And then Yeshua uses the same term again, like loving mother and father more than me. Um, but when he says that, that connotation is kind of referring back to this incident with the golden calf, that you would put your life um, um, above, or that you wouldn't allow the community of God if it was your own relatives, because that was basically the situation. So if you allowed your someone that you loved and you knew that they bowed down to this golden calf and you allowed them to live, the whole community would be destroyed while you're trying to spare their life. So again, the love hate covenantal legal language that he uses, but we don't really recognize that either. Um, just because our lack of understanding, lack of study, lack of language, and lack of connecting texts together. This is just my own experience and then what I've seen also with students. Um, I want to go back because I talked about the renewal covenant and um, those who were with Yeshua. This is how they saw it. Like in Deuteronomy, at the end, the covenant is renewed with the new generation, and so the covenant is renewed with them. The covenant with Israel, and they wanted to know when uh, the kingdom of Israel would be restored. There's a commentator that we're not Israel. Jacob adopted the two
Cutting out again.
sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. That actually was the open door, or paid the way for all to become part of Israel. Like that was the beginning of inclusion, like saying that anyone who comes into covenants, because Jacob adopts them, brings them in as a son, as his sons, because he believed that Rachel would have had more sons than uh, anyone really Israel. So, and the covenant became more universal, of course, having Yeshua as our high priest. One didn't have to be necessarily at the Mishkan or build an altar at this point because we have Yeshua making atonement for us. But anyway, I just want to say that it makes sense, like twining both um, everyone's heritage uh, to be Israel, to come like the promises or God's to Jacob um, applies to anyone who comes into covenant with the God of Israel. It's just that if you want it or not, and then again, A lot of things have been obscured for centuries. I know the church has done a lot of good, but it's done bad too. So, you know, and then we have like misunderstandings or manipulations of words, like the word Shekinah, which is a terrible of the Hebrew Shekhinah, and then Sakina, and then all three religions embrace this mystical idea of God's presence. So they took the all-important words of Mishkan and Shin Kaf Nun, which is often used with Mishkan because it contains the same consonants to um, talk of God's presence dwelling in the Mishkan, and then manipulate it into a mystical Kabbalistic term. This was done by a Jewish philosopher. You can look it up on Wikipedia. It's there. It's not a biblical word. And then that's the other thing with the whole Yahweh as the breath too. That's another manipulated teaching. It's Kabbalistic. So, um, but I never would have known that. I remember hearing about the Shekinah in church and whatever, but I didn't really know what it meant. Um, like I said, when I really sat down to study, I really didn't know what studying the Bible was until I started learning languages and then seeing how ignorant I was really and how much I didn't really know. Even reading the Bible for years, and it's just not the same. And like I said, you can stick with your translation, but definitely would recommend coming all in uh, and picking up your Heritage Return package of Hebrew.
Do you is there a way that people can engage? I just want, your opinion, how people should go about this. Is there a good way to engage with the biblical languages if you still I guess if you're still
On the
um
fence.
with the using a translation, like should people use like lexicons and such without having formal training in Hebrew? Is there a way
Well,
that
that
you
would
can
be
like, use it?
it would be kind of hard to like to do that without any. I mean, at the very least, you'd have to know the alphabet,
Right,
and you'd have to know what you're looking for. You know,
right.
like sometimes you like. I mean, you could get like a maybe I have a. Although I never really recommended interlinear would have a separate Hebrew Bible. I mean, but again, you would need to know at least the alphabet and vowels. There's just like there's no easy way around it. When I taught violin, the students would come in with this grandeur. They just heard Mozart and whatever, and then they squeak out, you know, hot cross buns, and the tears would come, and I just tell them, this is it. So there's no other way I can make this easier for you. You're just gonna have to stick with it and do it. Um, there's no escape. Um, I definitely recommend sticking with um, scholarly commentaries and Hebrew lexicons, because Holiday Hebrew lexicon is the supposed beginner. But again, like um, first you have to understand that Hebrew is a lifelong study. It's not like our education system has failed us in telling us that well, you finished 12 years of school, so you're done. Something like 90% of people or 80% of people never read another book after high school, and 90% after college never read another textbook. But if you're gonna like studying the Bible, which should be all of our uh, should encompass all of our lives, that's a lifelong thing. So Hebrew isn't really something to start, arrive at a point and be done with it. It's just something that will go on and on. You can't get to the end of the word, so you can never study enough. You can't live enough lifetimes even to be able to get to the end of the Bible. It's just every year or every year, every Torah cycle, you find something new, you see something new. So, and then with the Hebrew, um, you know, you have Genesis 2:28 and then 3:1. So there's a word in there, arum. So the first one is used to describe the condition of the man and woman as being without clothing or naked, and then the second one is to describe the serpent in 3:1 as being Arum or Mikol Chayot Sadeh or something like this from all the animals of the field. And so, but when you see that word Arum and 228, and I think it's 228 or 225, and then in 3:1, you know that something's going to happen with this word. It's like a tell. So you do miss a great portion of text without the language, without knowing anything. And again, like I said, English is limited. It gives you a limited view. And even like when we talked about where it says, that Yeshua um, is here he is in Nazareth, he should be called a Nazarene, and as the prophets have spoken. But I remember the first time I saw that, I was like, oh, well, because whenever you read something in the covenant renewal or the New Testament, your automatic response should be to go to the Tanakh because 100% of the time it's going to be in there. It's you either have a paraphrase, a direct quote, or an allusion to something in the Tanakh. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just look this up, and to find it didn't say that though. Like that phrase doesn't exist anywhere, not in the Tanakh, Talmud, Midrash, or Josephus. So then you have to think, well, what's going on then? And so then you understand that Natseret, Nun Sade Resh, uh, Tav, you have to see it as a wordplay. So you take the Nun Sade and Resh to look it up to see, what does it mean? And I think it's Isaiah 11:1 where it talks about Netzer, the root that springs up from Jesse. So that's what the prophets have said. And also you have some other, like Natsar is like Shamar, to keep guard. Um, it said he should be called a Notzri. So I forget what I want to say it's Neum, but you see, so these watchers on walls of Jerusalem. And so then you have all of these connections, but there's not really a way to understand what they're talking about without knowing what the root of the word is. And so a netzer is uh, a sprout or branch. So anyway, again, I'm sure I have it written on my other page, all these pages, so many
Yeah,
pages.
that passage
Mhm.
I'm familiar with the one in, Matthew about the prophets have spoken.
Yeah, I think it's
Right.
Matthew 2:23.
Right, right.
Right,
That's a
right.
that's a
I think it's
pretty big
2:23.
one. Uh, that's one that I've heard anti-missionaries, bring a lot before. Oh, the Tanakh doesn't say this. Where is he getting this
Uh-oh.
from? So it's an important one to understand for sure.
And then another one is Nasa no. Nasa no. Nasa, Nun, Sin, Aleph. So normally we read in the Tanakh, it says that, if you do this, you will bear your sin. And then we read in the book of John, where John introduces Yeshua, he says, behold, the Son of Man that takes away the sin of the world. So takes away the sin. And so that's like, I don't see how you could in English connect those two terms together. Nasa abono, so he will bear the sin of the world, where normally you would bear your own sin. But you can't connect those two phrases like with English. And this is why I just find over and over again that it doesn't mean that, translations are useless, obviously, but would say that you need more. And also not just with the translations, but seeing yourself as Israel, part of the community of Israel now. At some point we sort of have to move away, in some ways, from church teachings and come into um, this covenant renewal and um, establishment or renewal of Israel. This is what, I mean, when you die, you're not gonna end up at the Empire States Building. You're gonna be, in the Holy City. You know what I mean? It's not. Uh, So we sort of have to keep some of these things in mind. Um,
Yeah, New York isn't the holy city.
Christianity or Christendom is a vehicle to bring the message of salvation, but it's not really a religious system. It's God who awakes the heart, and it's not through man-made traditions which tend to obscure rather than shine light on the whole truth of God's word. So I see studying Hebrew coming into one's Hebraic heritage. Um, I know people will say, well, it's not a salvation issue, which I think that that's kind of an elementary. I had a student who made a comment about that, and I agree with him actually, because he just said, he's not comfortable with people saying that, because we can literally say that for anything. Well, I don't believe in the gifts of the Spirit, but it's not a salvation issue. I don't believe in this, but it's not a salvation issue. It's just kind of cheapens salvation in a way. Um, anyway, I just say a lot of. Oops, okay, you're still there. A lot of things have been obscured by Christian tradition, and again, I'm not saying Christianity is bad or whatever, but now it's time to start to come into uh, the restoration of all Israel and to know His word. Um, to whatever extent one can study and to try to go beyond just reading a translation, um, just to get more depth into and more connecting the word together. Because this is what I found like with a lot of Hebrew students, because they had a difficulty with, they didn't have a problem with reading the Tanakh, but with reading the renewal covenant because it's taught so differently. Um, and it's really not connected a lot of times to anything. I mean, how many more centuries are going to read John 3:16 and without also acknowledging that at the end, before Yeshua ascended, he only prayed for those who were his in the world, but he did not pray for the world because at that point he rejected the world because the world had rejected him. And again, you still have the same like Esau and Jacob. Jacob was accepted, Esau was hated or rejected because of his rejection of God and the covenant. So we don't want to do that anyway. At one time, I tried to like see if I could do like more of a simpler biblical Hebrew program, but it's very difficult. I mean, you simply just have to commit yourself to study at whatever level you can. Um, and the more you study, the more you see that you need to. Um, and I know not everybody's gonna do it or want to do it because it does take time. I've had people stop because they told me they just don't enjoy it, and so what can I do? It doesn't. There's no. The only thrill that you'll have with study is just your own understanding of the Bible, like and seeing more than you ever seen before, and that's like would have to be. There's no balloons or flashing clowns or I remember when the Harry Potter it's so ridiculous to even say though, but the Harry Potter Bible camps popped up and like everybody you were just a little spring chicken at that point, but everybody was racing, they couldn't uh, Bible camp of Harry Potter. I just thought to myself, what are we doing? And but something like this is again, lifelong commitment. It just you just have to see it that way. And embrace your Hebrew um, heritage and covenant responsibility. Um, so you can start by honoring Shabbat and cleaning out the old leaven. One of my biggest inspirations studying too, because um, like when we lived or they live in Florida now, but when they lived in the North Cape Cod, he would go. They were pastors for like 32 years, and he would go down to the basement with a blanket because it was freezing, and he would put it over the heater and study and read the Bible for like hours and pray. And I remember I always wanted to be like him. my dad that way, and when I started studying, that's like I said again, because I can't emphasize enough how ignorant I really was and how I didn't really know anything. I mean, the basics, obviously, Jesus saves, okay, so you know, and then the basics of what you read in English, but um,
Right.
I really learned what it meant to study. So if you want that kind of challenge, take up the Hebrew. Uh, and if you don't, well, maybe you have a good friend who is taking up the challenge and can help you along a little bit. Anyway,
Yeah. For the viewers, if there is any lag like that, just know Shamir's all the way in Israel and I'm in the US, so I mean that might be a contributor, but
right.
um
Now, I know it's raining here. I don't know if I don't know if the internet issue is on our side though, but
yeah, I'm not
anyway.
sure. It's very windy here. Um are you about at the end of your notes here?
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
think it's
okay.
probably long enough, no?
Yeah, it's probably a good speed, so we can wrap it up. So Shamir, I'll leave your channel information in the description and your website so people can go and check you out. And
Okay.
you can contact Shamir through her website, I believe, if you're interested in classes. That would be amazing. We can get some
Yeah.
support to Shamir.
Or WhatsApp or Facebook. I mean, yeah, Facebook Messenger is
Yeah,
good.
yeah. So
So,
we'll leave
or
all that.
if you just have a general comment, no hate or whatever, because if you send me like a hate email, I'm just gonna delete it, and then you would have just wasted all of your energy, like typing me like, "Grr."
Yeah. I don't think anything too controversial was said. Might ruffle little feathers with this
Oh
one.
yeah, yeah.
That's
Well,
fine. It
that's
happens all the time.
ruffling feathers is like my life, so
Part of
don't
the
really.
job.
Yep, it is part of the job. So anyway,
Um, but
God didn't tell me that either. Like,
yeah.
like you're gonna
Uh,
ruffle feathers.
other than that, anybody watching this video, the second part with Carl, like I said in the beginning, is delayed, but we're gonna go um on uh divert a little bit from the first part and have Carl on again somewhat soon. So stay tuned for that and uh like this video so it gets out there and share it so it gets out there. Um Also subscribe.
Will,
We had a lot of viewers last
will
time.
Carl will Carl have his iconic bookshelf there?
Oh, I hope so.
We're all looking forward to that.
I hope so.
The Carl bookshelf. Nobody can do it like Carl. Nobody.
Right. Right. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and
All right.
end here. So
Okay.